Most popular oils referred to as mink oil are often actually blends of conditioning agents, oils, waxes, and petroleum-based products. These can permanently stay inside the leather while we have little idea what's really in there. Pure mink oil has none of these additives and is just mink oil. So we're going to check out the differences between the blends and the pure mink oil. We're going to go through what's in them, and then we're going to test each one so you can see the results for yourself and which one you may prefer. So with that, let's dive right in. So first, we have a bottle of the really popular Fiebing's Mink Oil Liquid. This has been around for a long time, and a lot of folks have some really great results with it. So let's look first at the ingredients. So here we have mink oil, we have silicone, we have lanolin, and we have neatsfoot oil. So it's really interesting because often folks will talk about, using mink oil or neatsfoot oil and leather, and they have preferences for one over the other. So it's interesting because this actually has neatsfoot oil in it. It also has silicone in it, which can have some petroleum product use during production, and silicone will often stay in the leather for a really long time. So let's see how it looks. We'll open up the bottle, and we'll pour a little bit right in here. Let's see what it's all about. So if we look, it's actually a relatively clear liquid. There's a bit of a yellow tint to it, but other than that, it's pretty viscous. So that's what we're working with. So next, we'll test it out by applying it to a leather round. And so here I've got a few different rounds. One is going to be unconditioned. I'll keep that aside so we can compare. And then this one, we'll apply the conditioner to. So typically what I'll do is I'll put down something over the workspace. That way, when we're conditioning around the edges, it doesn't get onto everything else that we are working on. And for this, I'll use generally a cotton cloth that is lint free. And you can cut up an old t-shirt or get anything, like that, but pretty easy. And then we'll typically just go to the bottle and do a quick tip over like that. And you'll see that the oil is now on your cotton cloth. And then we just go onto our leather and apply it in a circular motion. We'll do that a few times to make sure we get a nice, even, consistent coverage. And we'll do this one more. All right, and then there we have it, our newly conditioned leather. We see that right there. So we've got that. So now let's look at what it was before we conditioned it. All right, so clearly there's a difference to it as that mink oil is penetrating into it. But of course, as it dries, it's going to lighten in color. So for good comparison, I have a piece here that has been dry for around 24 hours. And so we could see a difference between the three. So the one in the middle isn't really going to make a huge factor because that, will dry anyway. So let's look at these two here. And I'll move this. All right. So here on the left is the untreated, and here on the right is treated with the Fiebing's mink oil and dry. So it's a little bit darker, but not significantly. And so that can be great because some conditioning agents will darken leather a lot, but this seems to darken it, just a tiny little bit. So that's the Fiebing's mink oil. And for a bottle, this is around, $8 to $10, depending on, when and where you purchase it. And it's about 8 ounces in volume. Next, we have our pure mink oil. So this example is around 99% pure, and it is a cosmetic grade mink oil. And you could also find on occasion commercial grade mink oil. So for example, our Fiebing's Mink Oil liquid was around $10 for 8 ounces. And when we look at the pure cosmetic mink oil, that's going to be around $40 to $50 per ounce, which is certainly a lot. When we look at our commercial grade mink oil, the price goes down a lot more if you could find it. It depends on production and availability, but that can get down to just a few dollars an ounce of commercial mink oil. So it doesn't have to be prohibitive to get pure mink oil. It's just about finding a good place and a reliable source for it. So for here, we want to test thoroughly and accurately as possible. So we have our cosmetic grade, which is theoretically one of the higher grades. So it should give us some nice results. So in terms of how it looks, it's a clear bottle, so you could see how it looks. It is primarily transparent with a little bit of a yellow tint to it. So similar to the mink oil liquid from Fiebing's, but maybe just a little bit lighter, in its color. So to apply it, we'll put down our base here. And again, we have 2 rounds, not treated either yet. So we're going to treat this one and see how it comes out. And for this, I'm going to use a cosmetic sponge. So when applying conditioners and cleaners, if they're not solvent-based, cosmetic sponges can be a great option as well for applying, because they do absorb some, but they have a nice dense fiber pattern to give you some easy, consistent application of it. So since this bottle is such a tiny little one, we'll use the cosmetic sponge so that we can dab it in. And also because it's crazy expensive, we don't want to waste a lot soaking into a cotton rag. So here we'll just kind of dab this in. You can see there's some on there. And then when we go to our leather, we just apply it just like the other. And so we'll do that a few times until we get all of our coverage. And it's going on pretty evenly. And if you could see, where we pushed down originally is going to have a little bit more of a concentration. So what I'll do is I'll kind of go over the different areas and make sure we have an even application throughout. And then at the end, I'll just do a light coat over everything. And that way it kind of blends it all together and helps make sure it's got an even coat over the whole surface. And we'll do our final pass. All right. So there we have it. It is our pure mink oil. And when we look at our already starting to dry Fiebing's, and here's our pure mink oil. So don't look at it for color per se, because this obviously has had time to dry, but even for kind of surface look and feel, close up, I don't know if I want to say the one on the right feels a little smoother, but that could just be subjectivity. But anyway, they're still drying, so we'll leave them be. But what we'll do is we'll compare that to the original color, and we could see obviously the recently applied one is going to be darker. So now let's check into what it looks like when the pure mink oil dries. So here we have a sample that was dried over 24 hours with the pure mink oil, and we can see there that it obviously lightens up a bit. So let's look at these two, and here's basically the before and after, and there isn't too much of a color change at all. It's very light, very subtle, and the pure mink oil, like barely has a color change to it. maybe a tiny bit, a little different, but mostly the same. So that's a nice indicator. If you're looking for something that's not going to change the color very much, pure mink oil might be an option there. So let's compare the two. We've got our mink oil blend here, and we have our pure mink oil here. And here are our two samples, our Fiebings and our pure. So when we're looking at the results, they're going to be relatively similar. The pure mink oils seem to have a little bit of a less of a color change, but it's really, not that significant when compared to other types of conditioners. So either one's going to work. The next thing to consider is going to be the ingredients. Since the mink oil blend, which many mink oils out there do have a blend, they're going to have other ingredients. So for example, silicone. That can help with flexibility and water resistance. And so if you want that in your leather fibers, that can be a great choice as long as you know that you're putting it in there. For other applications, having those things in there may not be as preferable, especially long term, because once they're in there, they're pretty much in there. So if you're in that context, you may want to look at a pure mink oil because that'll have just the mink oil in it and nothing else. So as with most needs, it's really context dependent and what you're trying to do. There's kind of no all or nothing, like always do this or always do that. So here's some information to help inform you a little more on some of the options that are out there, what they look like, and how they work. So if you have any questions, let us know. And if you have any experience with either of these you'd like to share, please do. And there you have it. Until next time.